record on this computer. Yeah, there we go. All right, so now it's going to be recording. I cannot hear anything. Can you guys hear everything?
Yeah, we can.
You guys can, right? So Sean is saying you can't hear anything. Odd. Okay. So let's just do this like before. And so hopefully this really hits it home. Maybe opening this up. So I'm muting everyone. Please don't unmute yourself, just so, because this is all recorded. I figure I'd do this because I don't know why every time we do this, someone decides that they definitely don't want to mute or don't understand how to mute. So we're just going to forcefully mute. Okay. This is first day. And let me just go through the topics. So this is something that I wanted to cover. We didn't really get to cover as much. So the important stuff about JavaScript and jQuery is understanding how to organize a JavaScript program with regards to global variables, functions, and function calls. So generally the flow of how an application goes is, so if I open this up, actually, let me open up a new one. Where am I gonna open it up? UCLA projects, practice actually, yeah. So if I have a JavaScript file, so I'm just going to call this script.js. Generally, I declare my variables that I'm going to use throughout my application at the top that are going to be global. So I know which ones are going to be global when I've pseudocoded. So for instance, if I've pseudocoded an application, I know, okay, I'm going to use these variables. Then what I do is I'd say, okay, var, counter. And I can do 0. I can also do var, let's say that I wanted to also count some other, I wanted to keep track of other things. So is finished, things like that. And then, I might just have this as something that's declared. If you wanted to declare these both at the same time, what you can do is put a comma. And what that does is it adds this var to this one as well. So that way you can initialize or declare multiple variables at the same time without having to continuously write var. So if I were to keep doing this, I could say, I think a good one, name equals user. So I have 3 variables and I've set them at the top. From there, I define the functions. So the reason that you want them at the top, you're going to see this in any computer science class. You can easily change them at the top, and so that you know where all your variables are that are global. If you just declare them all over the place, it's more difficult to find them. When you declare them at the top, it's like, oh, okay, I know where they are, and I know where to change them. You also instantiate and initialize all of your objects and everything, usually at the top. But generally it's for initializing variables and then setting your functions. So then it goes to the part about creating the functions and function calls. So generally the functions should go at the top. So this is going to be like a helper function. This is going to be an output function. And this is going to be the execution function. Now, this gets into a little bit more like computer science, but we are going to, actually, no, this is software engineering, so that's fine. So yeah, this is software engineering. Generally, you're going to be doing your processing separate than your output, and then you're going to have an execution. You're also going to have something for your input. If there is something coming from your user for input. So these are the different things that occur. So helper function for processing data, function that displays information, function that, that executes, and function responsible getting user input. Now, again, this is just a very broad understanding of how to do this in software engineering in general. The concept is the separation of input and output. So you're going to see something like this. Input and output should be separated because one is responsible for input, the other one's responsible for output. And then you also have an execution function, and you also have a bunch of helper functions, likely. So your execution function is going to look something like this. So I can show you a real application. So if we have my logic flow over here, this is handling a whole bunch of things. This is a bunch of processing happening. But notice that there's very few things in here, right? So these are my execution functions. So what's happening in this one function over here, get all GitHub files, and then lint repo, and then I'm going to call this something else actually. Right now it's just saying content object being passed into run test. But if I do run tests, it's like, okay, I know what's happening. So the logic flow is my this over here, this execute homework checks function is responsible for all of the execution for my application. So this is one giant execution function. So that is correspondent to what I have over here, right? So this is my execution function. Now, generally, this is at the bottom. It's defined at the bottom, and it's also called at the bottom. So I wouldn't generally, like, if you have a larger application, it wouldn't even be in the same file. It'd be in a separate file. But we're not working with huge applications yet, right? So I definitely need to do this. I need to have this in a separate file. And then I have like all my processing. I have a bunch of different helper functions. And if you look over here, it's like these are all helper functions, right? These are all functions that help me process data. So these helper functions are located under helpers, or they could be their own processing files, right? So my execution goes in a usually in a single file, and then I have, or you could separate it further, and then it goes to other files for processing. So let's say that we have our execute. So instead of us writing out the code all in here for executing what we're supposed to do, what happens is this execute is just called once, and that is going to handle all the other things that happen. So this is going to call start counting. So you don't want to write the code inside here, right? You don't want to write your for loops and any code in here. You just want to have all the execution of all your functions inside of this execute function over here, right? Is that making sense? Fist of 5. Let's take a look at you guys. All right, so some people are not with videos, so can you guys post to chat? Fist to 5, 0 to 5. Just on execution and separating helper functions. All right, so 4 people responded. Excellent. Out of 13 people here. Okay, the rest of you, I think I saw putting your hands up, so it's fine. All right, so execute will execute all of the functions from top to bottom. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to say, okay, well, this start counting. Well, this is just me saying, hey, I need to, execute something. So start counting, I'm just going to say, okay, counter plus plus, right? That's processing. That's very basic processing. So input is actually going to get user input. So it's probably going to have, user input, something like that. Let's just say that we got input from the user. So input from user is utilized for getting the data from the user. So generally it occurs like this: input from user. Let's just say execute numerical function. How about this? I need to increment number. And then finally we have output. So generally this would actually not be the case because it's actually logging something out. So why don't I just get this? Yeah, I got an idea. Okay. Name equals user input. Okay, that makes sense. Cool. All right. Yep. No. Okay. So now we have all the very basics of an input-output application. So this is how you structure most applications, like any basic application, whether client-side, server-side, and whether you're doing like embedded systems or you're doing like whatever. This is like a very basic structure of any execution of an application and whatnot. So it's very, very rudimentary, but it is important. So I have a helper function, so start counting. I have my output separated. I have my input separated. And the input is just for gathering the input from the user. So this could be, let's say, tied to some kind of event listener. We are not tying it to event listener right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually put this information in. But normally this would be coming from the user if there is a user being using your application and the information is coming from a user. Now, it's not mandatory, but we're going to pretend that this information is coming from a user. So let's say that they clicked on something, they put in their name, they submitted it, and it went through our application. So first thing, we get that username. So we're just going to say Darlene. I don't know. So you have Darlene. So the input's coming from the user. So what this does is it grabs that information, processes that information, and then puts it into the variable. So we have name equals, and then now it's going to be what? So let's post our answers to chat. What is name going to be equal to? Our global variable name. Yep, Darlene, not method man. Damn it. All right, so I have name as the variable, right? As a global variable, I passed it in here. And so this is referring to this. When I pass in the user input into input from user, this argument is being passed into this function. Darlene is an argument being passed in. And so name is then going to be equal to Darlene, okay? From there, what function am I executing? So after input from user, what function am I calling? Start counting, exactly. So start counting is going to execute. So what is start counting going to do? Yes, increment the counter variable by 1. Excellent, guys. All right, so it's going to increment this counter by 1. So now when I output, I'm going to output user's name is this, and I'm also going to output something else. So name. So now this is responsible for all output. So then what do I see in this output? So think about it and then post what you guys think is going to happen. Yes, so it's going to display user's name is Darlene, and Darlene has increased the counter to 1. Excellent. So that's going to be what gets displayed. And that's the basics of creating an application and structuring it correctly. So this is a very rudimentary basics of creating an application. So if you guys take any computer science class, then you like computer science 101, the first thing they're going to say is like separating input, separating output, processing, and execution. So it's going to look something like this, right? Sometimes you guys are going to have this at the top, especially if you guys take Java or take the computer science class in Java. It's going to look like this, but it doesn't really matter. I like having it at the end because it makes more sense to me, because this is the thing that's going to execute at the very end. So if I'm going to call it, I want it to have all the functions at the end. So I think it makes more sense. Questions about that? So fist of 5 on understanding of this. Let's just type it in, because I think there's so many people that are not using their videos. Okay, so pretty good understanding. Yes, this is going to be recorded. This is already being recorded. All right, no worries. So what I'm going to do now is go to the next part. So be able to use old JavaScript code to capture key clicks. So if we go to some of our older JavaScript code, let's go to that. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Please use that. That's all. jQuery. Scope, my first object. I think this one has it. Okay. Yeah, this one has it. Do we type script first? So remember, you're never, this is bad practice. And do you need the script tag inside of a JavaScript file? No, it's because this is only used for rendering JavaScript inside of HTML. So you should only be using the script tag if you're trying to render JavaScript inside of HTML. Otherwise, your JavaScript file will automatically render this. Again, you should not be using this JavaScript in page, right? This makes it in page JavaScript. Now, we only do this because this makes it easier to teach because we have all the HTML and the JavaScript on the same page. So I've said this multiple times. Again, do not do this. We only do it for teaching purposes. So, all right. We have this document.onKeyUp, right? So I'm going to take this, and we're going to take a look at document.onKeyUp. So this is the regular old JavaScript way of doing things. So if we say document.onKeyUp, what is it doing? What is it listening for? What event is the DOM listening on? Yes, for the key to be released, right? Any key to be released. OnKeyUp means that anytime a key is released, not a click, just a key up. Document onKeyUp is very specific. So onKeyUp is going to be equal to function.event. That means I'm basically saying this is a function expression. So whenever the user presses up on a key, a function will trigger, and I will then execute the following function, and I'll get this event implicitly passed, right? So again, this is passed to it implicitly. That means I don't have to do anything in order to get this event. In order to use it, all I have to do is put this word in there. I can put this as anything. I can say blah, 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 but it makes sense to call it event, right? So I can do event.key. And what that happens is I can get the key that was pressed and store it. So if I want to see what's coming out of that event, I can actually do this. So let me do console.log event. So let's go to my, let's open this up. If I hit the up arrow, it has this entire event object, which has a whole bunch of stuff inside. It has all these things, including the code arrow up, right? It has the key arrow up. It has all these different things inside of it. So what we did was we said, okay, take this object, the event, and get the key, event.key, arrow up. And we're saying store it as user guess. Now, we're storing that, which is just a string, right? We look at this, and arrow up is a key. You guys see that? So we get that, and we store that into user guess. So what is user guess then equal to at this point? Let's write it down in chat. What is user guess equal to? If I hit the, what if I hit the letter M? What is user guess equal to if I hit the letter M? Yes. It's just M, because user guess is event.key. All right, so computer guess. Now this is going to be something else. I don't think we need to get into this whole program. Basically, the concept I wanted to do was just showing old JavaScript code to capture key clicks, right? Now, use old JavaScript code to generate random numbers. So if I wanted to generate random numbers, a random number could be generated by just saying math.random, and I could just say times computerchoices.length. Now, this is saying the number of elements. So math.random gives you a random number between 0 and 1. So why don't we do that? Why don't I show you guys what's happening? So if I refresh this page, each time I refresh, you see this giant random number, but does it ever get bigger than 1? No. Well, watch what happens when I do this. Math.random times 2. Now it's like between 0 and 2. Now if I do 0, or if I do 10, you notice that? So what's happening is it's giving me a random number between 0 and then this is my now upper limit, right? So now if I wanted to make this so it's always rounded, because we don't need all the decimal points, right? So if we want a random number between those, pretty cool, right? So that's how you get a random number out. So floor will just round it down. Math.random gives you a random number between 0 and 1. You still have all those decimal places, but you're just rounding it, so you don't get that. All right. So why might we use a JavaScript library like jQuery? Why do we use jQuery? It makes things easier. Do more with less. I think that's their like thing, right? Do more with less. Okay, hold on. Hold on. Let me see. Write less, do more. That's it, right? So it makes things shorter to do. You can do the exact same thing with JavaScript with what we call vanilla JavaScript, right? Vanilla JavaScript just means plain old JavaScript, right? So plain old JavaScript will work just fine, but when you do this, it gives you some additional functionality. All right, so well, not additional functionality. So it gives you the ability to have the same functionality with shorter lines of code. So be able to explain what the jQuery. What is this syntax? What does this do to any selector that I pass into it? What does it convert it to? So jQuery object, right? So this syntax converts it to a jQuery object. A jQuery object is what? What data structure does jQuery object exist as? A jQuery object is an object, but it returns what? What does it return as? Specifically, what type of object? You guys remember? No, not a string. No guessing, guys. Come on, look it up. If you're lost, make sure you don't just like try and guess like anything that you think of. Like try and think about it first. I see a lot of people just wanting to be right and like just blurting out like pizza. I'm like, no, that think about it first. Like it doesn't like we're not trying to be right here, we're trying to learn, right? So it doesn't matter like if someone gets the right or wrong answer. It's just about the learning experience. So if I have, let me open up jQuery. Oh, this is too complicated. Let me go to a simple one. Yeah, this one's pretty easy. All right. So if I click on this, it says I've been clicked, right? So now what I'm going to do is instead I'm going to show the jQuery object. Notice that it returns in the form of a array. Yes, excellent. Yes. When you see this, an array is technically an object, right? So this is technically an object because it's an array is a collection of key value pairs, but it's just stored in a different way, right? So we have this array, and how many DOM elements are inside of this array? How many do you guys see? One. It's an array of one element, one DOM node being returned. Excellent. No, just one. So you notice that it says 0. There's no other elements, so 0 is the only one. So if I do this on it, if I do array indexing and I say, okay, give me just the only one that's in there, so I had 0 index, and I click it again, now it gives me back the DOM node. Pretty crazy. All right. All right, be able to use jQuery to capture button clicks. We just did that, but basically this is one way of doing it. You have a jQuery selector. Then we have a method. The method could be the event listener, or it could be the event listener with the argument like click as an event. This is using it in a more complex way. So we could just do this. Make it easier, make it even easier. There is a whole, again, JavaScript jQuery is just there to make it easier. So there's even this method, makes it even shorter. It's the exact same thing as me doing this. It's just shorter, that's all. So if I do this, it's the same thing. It's like click me on click. So you can pass it. What kind of events can I pass it? Can I just make up my own events? Where do these events come from? Where do the events come from? Yes and no. Close though. jQuery doesn't make up the events. Good guess though. So think about it. If this is again, don't automatically answer. I'm seeing people automatically answer before thinking. So I want you guys to really think about it and research. So if I have an event, where do these events possibly come from? Don't try to be the first person to answer correctly. Be the person to learn the most. So really think about it. In fact, I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to think about it. You can research, you can find out where events come from, and that'll be a much better learning experience. Yes, Levon, it is JavaScript, but where in JavaScript? How is it coming from JavaScript? No, the event. Where's the event coming from? So what's the event in this case? What event are we listening for? Click, correct. So what other events are there? No, so the user is executing the event, right? But where are these events coming from, right? You said correctly, JavaScript. So how does JavaScript do it? So if we take a look at it, we look at JavaScript. We see JavaScript actually contains what? If I look up JavaScript events, or I can even just type in, where do JavaScript events come from? And it shows, oh, introduction events, learn web development. And it's from a resource that I mentioned. A series of fortunate events. Very nice. I didn't see that. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of different events, and it explains it really well. But there's a whole bunch of different events. So there are JavaScript event examples. These are just some of them, right? So these are all different events that you can actually listen for. These are all predefined inside of JavaScript, right? So JavaScript contains all these events, and they're predefined. You can't just make them up. You have to listen on these events, okay? Yeah, so it is JavaScript's API. That is correct. All right. But again, it's not about like trying to be the first to be right. I would actually much prefer you guys to take your time and not give an answer immediately, because again, this field is very much about critically thinking and doing that a lot. So you're gonna have to think a lot and think really deeply about things and then get to a conclusion, as opposed to just immediately knowing something. Like, it's not like biology where it's just like memorization. There's almost none of that, right? So definitely really think about things, and don't worry about like being the first or the last to answer things. It's more about like practicing and trying to critically think and then come up to a conclusion based on your logic. So when you guys go into interviews, they're especially going to care about this. I had a student last cohort that memorized solutions to whiteboarding algorithms, and that was terrible. What happened was they were able to get to the Fibonacci sequence just because they did it so many times, and they didn't explain any of their logic. They failed their interview because even though they got the answer right, they didn't explain it well enough, right? So explaining your logic about how you got to the conclusion is what they're going to ask for in your interview. You can get the answer completely wrong, but if they like the way that you think, that's going to help get you the job. Every single interview I've seen, they're all like, I want to know how you think. So explain it. Oh, this is the first step that I did. Then I took this step, and then I think I'm going to do this. But then maybe I'm going to actually do this because of this reason. And then I'm going to do this. All right, and then I did this part, and then I'm going to now work on this part. And that's what's really like insightful. If you just give the answer, it's like anyone can do that. Anyone can just look up an answer. But if it shows that you can derive the problem, that shows that you really know how to problem solve. All right. All right, so jQuery methods for changing HTML. Everyone understand the difference between memorization and critically thinking now? All right. So again, don't worry about like answering first. Just much prefer you guys just like think about it and answer after you like feel comfortable or you've researched a bit more. Cool. All right. So if I want to change some HTML, what I can do is after it says click me, I want to append some HTML. Or I can just do this. Let me add another thing in here, and I can say so now we have a part that says click me and change me. So what I want to do is I want to update this change me every time this is clicked. So when I click it, what's going to happen is I'm going to do the following. So change me. I'm going to change this to some HTML. So if I just want to change the text, I'm just going to use text. I'm going to just change it to changed man. All right, so I hit refresh. It hasn't been changed. When I click it, now I'm a changed man, right? Click again, it's just going to keep replacing it. So this will replace everything within the content of here. So even if I had a whole bunch of stuff in there, let's say I had, h1. Actually, let's div. Make this a div. Change this in here. A lot of content to be replaced. So now this has 2 DOM nodes within it, right? So I want to change these, right? So I want to change this, and I want to replace this. So if I do this, notice that it replaces everything within that node, right? So when I clicked it, it changed everything instead of change me because it contained all this is the content inside of change me, right? Same thing if I use HTML, and I can use that same thing. No, that should have worked. Let's see, did I do it wrong? Oh, it only allows me to pass in HTML. Ooh, know that. Okay. Then let me change it to key. Oh, wait, I think I know what happened. Yeah, that does work. I was just clicking on the wrong thing. Yeah, so this works the same. And then if I wanted to add HTML, the HTML tags work inside of HTML, so it renders this. It allows me to render H1. So if I do this, I can actually click this, and it'll display the HTML. Okay, I think that's pretty much it, because the rest of them are just like asking you questions. All right, so now I'm gonna open up to questions. So if you're asking a question, you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have a question. When do we use this, THIS, and interval?
So when do we use this? This is used whenever we're inside of a calling object and we're trying to access the properties of the calling object, or we're trying to access the calling object itself. We use set interval whenever we're trying to execute a function over a set period of time. So if I'm trying to execute something and x, like every x number of seconds, that's when set interval is used.
So we use interval in all the like timeout script.
I'm sorry?
So interval is a syntax or is just a method?
And set interval and set timeout are functions that are actually methods that are tied to the window object. No other questions?
I have one.
Yes, Isaac, what's up?
In the concept of method man, right? That it's the object. It's a function inside an object that's called a method.
Yes.
So by that rationale, does that mean that I can pretty much make up my own methods as I go inside an object?
Yeah. Oh wait, as you go inside of an object, I mean, if you are creating
in an object in that context.
Yeah, when you're creating an object, you can definitely make up a method. That's how you're going to be generating them. So if I do this, let's say that I create an object. What is an object? Give me an object. Let me just make an object up. Okay. So if I have an object, some object equals this. This is me just making up some function. And this is me like predefining it. I can also on the fly create other methods. So if I wanted to create another method, I can say something. And now this method, say something, was now added to some object. So if I wanted to console.log some object, it would actually show all that. So let me get rid of all this. No, let me keep some objects. This, get rid of. Why is this? Oh, it's not needed. If I do this, it shows that I have both methods, some function and say something. So you're able to either predefine it or dynamically add the method to the function.
And can you pass parameters to that function?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if I wanted to pass things inside of it, like let's say that I execute it. This is not me executing it, right? If I wanted to execute, I can actually make it like blah. Let me just do blah. Or param. I don't know, I'm just gonna call it param. And now I can pass something into it.
All is illuminated. Thank you.
All right, so my computer's about to die, but hopefully this was helpful, a second review. So anyway, make sure that you guys are practicing all your JavaScript stuff. That is all really important. I'm gonna stop sharing. This week we're gonna continue with just JavaScript. I think we're using timers. You guys are gonna be creating a trivia game based on like the timers and everything. So make sure you get really good at set timeout and set interval, and understanding like how the logic applies and when it should apply. And again, don't worry about just getting things right. Make sure that like are immediately, you're not looking for immediate satisfaction. It's gonna be a very delayed satisfaction, right? Where it's gonna take a while. You're gonna have to think about it, and once you solve it, then you get that satisfaction. So just keep that in mind. Video is going to be probably up as soon as I'm done with this. Cool. All right. I'm done. So I'll catch you guys, some of you tomorrow and then the rest of you on Tuesday. Good night, everyone.